I'm going to start today by reading you a paragraph. I just want you to listen and tell me if you have any idea what's going on.
Okay, I'm ready. Lay it on me.
All right, quote. The procedure is actually quite simple. First, you arrange the items into different groups. Of course, one pile may be sufficient depending on how much there is to do. If you have to go somewhere else due to lack of facilities, that is the next step. Otherwise, you are pretty well set.
Very vague. Keep going.
It is important not to overdo things. That is, it is better to do too few things at once than too many. It goes on about how a mistake can be expensive and how soon, however, it will become just another facet of life.
Okay. Any thoughts?
It's just maddening. It sounds like a manual for, I don't know, a very boring government coup. Or maybe building a nuclear reactor. Arranging items, lack of facilities. My brain just slides right off it.
It does feel that way. But what if I gave you a single word that unlocks the whole thing? Just one. Laundry.
Laundry.
Now read that first sentence again.
First, you arrange the items into different groups. Whites and colors. Okay.
And if you have to go somewhere else due to lack of facilities,
The laundromat.
the mistake can be expensive.
Right. Shrinking my favorite sweater. Okay, that's immediate. The second you said the word, the fog just lifted. It went from complete noise to perfectly obvious instructions.
That click you just felt, that is the perfect way to start this deep dive. That's your brain applying what we call a schema.
Define that for us.
A schema is basically a mental framework, sort of a blueprint that helps you organize and interpret information. The research shows that without that laundry schema, your brain just couldn't encode the information.
So I understood the words, but I couldn't build a memory of it.
Exactly. You're just holding on to loose sentences with no context. We don't just record the world like a camera.
We interpret it.
Always. And that brings us to the mission for today. We're looking at a stack of research to dismantle the single biggest myth about memory, that it works like a video recorder.
I think most of us know, intellectually that we're not video cameras, but we still act like we are. If I lose my keys, I replay the tape in my head. I trust that tape.
And today we're going to learn why maybe you shouldn't. We'll look at the whole conveyor belt of memory, why you forget your password the minute you change it, and why eyewitness testimony is often way less reliable than a coin flip.
So basically, we're explaining why the brain is a terrible historian.
But a very creative storyteller.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Information comes, insights, sounds. Does it stick right away?
No, and this is where most of it gets lost. The first stop is called sensory memory. Think of it less like a hard drive and more like a camera flash. It captures everything, but the image fades in a split second.
How short are we talking?
Well, there was a landmark study by Sperling in 1960. He flashed a matrix of letters on a screen for just 50 milliseconds.
Whoa, okay, that's like a subliminal blink.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He'd ask people to list all the letters. Most people could only get about 4 or 5.
Which makes sense. It was way too fast.
That's what everyone thought. But Sperling had this hunch. He thought maybe the eyes did catch it all, but the memory faded before people could finish speaking. So he changed the experiment. He flashed the letters, but right after they disappeared, he played a tone. A high tone meant, tell me the top row, medium for middle, low for bottom.
And what happened?
People could report any row perfectly.
Wait a second. To do that, they must have had the whole picture stored in their head just for a moment, waiting for the command.
Precisely. They saw it all. It's called iconic memory. But, and here's the catch, it decays in less than a second. By the time you say the first 3 letters, the rest is just evaporated.
So we're constantly taking these higher snapshots of the world and then immediately throwing them in the trash.
Unless we pay attention. Attention is the bouncer at the club door. If you focus on something in that split second, it gets past the velvet rope and into the next room. Short-term memory.
Right, or as I call it, the place where phone numbers go to die.
Huh. Yeah, it's a very cramped room. Back in 1956, a psychologist, George Miller, he published this hugely famous paper. He argued that short-term memory has a really strict capacity limit. He called it the magic number.
Which is
7.
plus or minus 2.
7 items. That's it. That's the entire mental scratch pad.
That's the average number of slots, yeah.
You know, this explains a very specific trauma from my university days working as a barista. If a group of 4 came in, I was a hero. Latte, cappuccino, Americano, tea, done.
You look like a genius.
I did. But if a group of 8 walked up,
System failure.
total meltdown. I'd be scrambling for a pen. It felt like I was physically dropping the information, like I'm holding oranges and someone just keeps throwing more at me.
You literally were dropping it. And it's not just space, it's also time. Another study showed that if you can't rehearse the information, if you get distracted, it's basically gone in about 18 seconds.
18 seconds. That's so useless. When I look at a verification code on my phone and then tab over to the app, I'm literally racing against that clock.
Yeah.
It seems that way. But we humans, we're clever. We found a workaround. It's called chunking.
Chunking. Okay, explain how that works.
It's just about organizing input into bigger, meaningful units. Let's try it. I'll read you 12 digits. Ready? 1980199820003.
Nope, gone. I got the 1980 and then just noise.
Right. But what if I group them? 1980, 1998, 2003.
Oh, that's easy. That's just 3 years.
See what you did there? You didn't memorize 12 things. You memorized 3 chunks. You used your long-term memory, your knowledge of dates, to compress the data.
So it's like a zip file for the brain.
Exactly. That's why we break phone numbers into blocks.
Yeah.
We aren't expanding our brain's RAM. We're just getting smarter at file compression.
Okay, so I've got this tiny leaky bucket of short-term memory. But let's say we manage to hold on to something. Why do we still lose things? I want to talk about the party problem.
Ah, meeting new people.
Yes. I walk into a party, meet 10 people in a row. 5 minutes later, I remember the first person and I remember the last person, everyone in between. Just a blur of faces all named Dave.
That is a classic, really robust phenomenon. It's called the serial position effect. If you graph it, it looks like a big letter U.
Okay, so break down the U for me. Why do I remember the first guy?
That's the primacy effect. You remember the first person because you had the most mental space to rehearse their name. You said, "Hi, John. Nice to meet you, John," to yourself, so it likely made the jump to long-term memory.
Right, so John is saved to the hard drive.
Then on the other side of the U, you got the recency effect. If you remember the last person, because their name is still floating around in that 18-second short-term loop we talked about?
It just hasn't faded yet. So the start is on the hard drive, the end is in RAM. What about the middle Daves?
The middle is the danger zone. They weren't rehearsed enough to stick, but they were pushed out of that short-term buffer by all the new names coming in. They just fall into the abyss.
That's actually really comforting. I'm not rude. I'm just suffering from the serial position effect.
You can try telling them that, see if they buy it. But there's another force at play here too. It's called interference. We tend to think memory just fades, like an old photo. That's decay theory. But a lot of the time, the memory isn't fading, it's being bullied out.
Bullied by what?
Other memories.
Yeah.
You have 2 types, proactive and retroactive.
Okay, give me a real-world example.
Okay, your debit card, PINN. You have to change it. You go to the ATM, you know you changed it, but what do your fingers type?
The old one. Every single time. It's so annoying.
That's proactive interference. The old information is blocking the new. But now, fast forward a month, you've finally learned the new PIN. Now try to remember the old one.
I usually can't. It's just gone.
And that's retroactive interference. The new information has basically overwritten the old one. It's not just that the file is lost, it's that you hit save as and replaced it.
It's kind of scary how easily that data gets corrupted. It makes you wonder if anything is really safe in there.
Well, that depends on what kind of memory we're talking about. Because so far, we've only been talking about explicit memory facts, dates, names, the stuff you consciously try to remember.
Right.
But there's a whole other operating system running in the background. It's called implicit memory.
The autopilot?
Exactly. It doesn't require conscious awareness. A huge part of this is procedural memory.
Like riding a bike.
Or typing. This is a great test. If I asked you right now, without looking, which finger you use to press the letter K?
I have to move my hand. I'm literally air typing on my desk to figure it out. It's my middle finger.
You couldn't just tell me. Your conscious mind doesn't really know, but your fingers do. That knowledge is locked in the procedure, not in a fact you can state.
It's so strange to know something without knowing that you know it.
It gets even stranger with something called priming. This is where being exposed to one thing influences how you respond to the next thing, totally beneath your conscious radar.
Is this like the whole subliminal advertising idea?
In a way, yeah. Think about watching a really scary movie. Let's say The Shining. The movie ends, you're all tensed up. You go to the kitchen, the toast pops up.
And I jump out of my skin and throw the butter across the room.
Exactly. You were primed for fear. Your system was preloaded to interpret any sudden noise or movement as a threat. You didn't consciously decide, I shall now be afraid of toast. The priming did it for you.
It reminds me of, Pavlov's dog.
We like to think we're more sophisticated, but at the end of the day, we're all just slightly more complex Pavlovian dogs. The environment rings a bell and we salivate or panic without really knowing why.
So, okay, we have these fragile short-term memories, these interference patterns, this subconscious autopilot. But surely once a memory makes it to long-term memory, like a really important childhood memory, it stays there, right? It's safe.
And here we arrive at the most dangerous metaphor we have. Memory is not a library. It is not a file cabinet where you pull out an old file, read it, and put it back unchanged.
What is it then?
It's a wiki page.
Oh, wiki page, you mean?
Yeah.
It can be edited?
I mean, you edit it. Every single time you recall a memory, you are essentially clicking edit, opening the document, making tiny changes based on your current mood or new information, and then hitting save. You're overwriting the original file.
This goes back to, what, Sir Frederick Bartlett?
Yeah, way back in 1932, he showed that memory is a reconstruction. We remember the gist of things, and then our brain uses logic and our schemas to, fill in the empty spaces.
Because the brain just hates a gap in the story.
It absolutely abhors a vacuum. If I tell you a story about a man who entered a restaurant and then left, and I ask you later if he paid the bill, you'll probably say yes.
Right.
Even if I never mention money. Your restaurant schema says people pay, so your brain just inserts that detail to make the story feel complete.
That seems harmless enough.
It's harmless in a story. It's catastrophic when it puts an innocent person in prison.
The eyewitness problem.
This is where the science gets really heavy. We have to talk about the case of Jennifer Thompson and Ronald Cotton.
Walk us through it.
In 1984, Jennifer was attacked. It was obviously a deeply traumatic event, but during it, she made a very conscious, very brave effort to memorize her attacker's face.
She was actively trying to encode the memory.
Yes. Later, she picked Ronald Cotton out of a police lineup. She was 100% sure. In court, she pointed at him and testified. He went to prison for over 10 years, but DNA evidence later proved it wasn't him. He was a completely different man. But here's the truly terrifying part. Jennifer wasn't lying. To this day, she says that when she closes her eyes, the face she sees in that memory is Ronald Cotton's.
How is that even possible? How can your brain just overwrite the face of the actual person?
Well, things like the police lineup process, the positive reinforcement she got when she picked him, it all served as new information that edited her wiki page. Daniel Tractor calls this misattribution and suggestibility. The memory of the real attacker was overwritten by the face of an innocent man.
That just changes how I view every argument I've ever had with a friend. The "you said this, no I didn't" kind of fight. We're both so sure.
And you're probably both wrong. You're not arguing about what happened. You're arguing about a script that you've each rewritten 5 times since it happened, colored by how you feel right now.
So if our brains are this messy, if we forget, distort, and even invent things, are there people who don't have these problems?
There are. They're called mnemonists. You might have heard of Kim Peek, who was the inspiration for Rain Man, or a famous case study, a subject known only as S.
And what could they do?
S had essentially unlimited memory. A researcher could give him a grid of hundreds of random letters and numbers. S could memorize it in minutes and then recall it perfectly years later.
Years later, with no forgetting curve?
No decay. No bouncer kicking things out of the club. Nothing.
That sounds like a superpower. I mean, imagine going through university with that. You'd never have to study.
You'd think so, but for S, it was actually a curse. Imagine reading a book, but every single word triggers this flood of specific, vivid memories that you can't turn off. He couldn't understand poetry because metaphors just got lost in all the literal images.
He couldn't see the forest for the trees.
Not at all. He couldn't prioritize anything because everything felt equally important. It turns out, forgetting isn't a bug in our system. It's a feature.
A feature.
We need to forget the license plate of the car in front of us this morning, or what we had for lunch 3 Tuesdays ago. We have to clear out that useless data so we can focus on what actually matters.
So we clear the cache to keep the browser running smoothly.
Precisely. General knowledge, what we call semantic memory, is far more valuable for survival than retaining every single piece of trivia. Intelligence isn't knowing everything, it's knowing what to ignore.
So, to wrap this all up, we started with the laundry.
Which taught us that context is everything for encoding. If you don't have the story, you won't remember the details.
We talked about that terrifyingly short 18-second window of short-term memory.
And the magic number 7, you have to respect the limits, use chunking, break things down.
And rehearse it. Don't let interference bully that new info out.
And finally, you have to accept that your long-term memory is a creative act. You have to be humble about what you think you know for sure.
That's the big one for me. Be humble about your own history.
Absolutely.
So, here's the thought I want to leave everyone with today. If memory is reconstructive, and if every time you tell a story about your childhood, you're actually rewriting it just a little bit, how much of your own life story, the key moments that you think make you you, actually happened the way you remember it?
And if that memory, true or not, is what shaped who you are today, does it even matter if it's partly fiction?
Something to chew on. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Always a pleasure.